Deep theological, huh?
If I really want to focus on it, because it's just conflicting information. Well, you walk over there.
I try. It rarely happens.
It's like some people can work or what have you with music on or having the TV playing in the background. I can't,
I start singing and focusing on the
unless I'm doing something mindless.
I took a trip to Tennessee tomorrow.
I can't listen to music and work. No.
It depends depends on the music or how loud it is. Get up here. Come on. What?
We made it all the way to 55. Last week. Somewhere around there.
Would somebody fire me from teaching this class right now?
We did last week since we got you back.
I don't like the hecklers. I'm live or close enough to it. I'm glad I don't have things I could throw at the eldership here. Oh,
Some of us are alive too much.
it's not the eldership, it's just Dawn. Oh, I forgot that you were an elder now. Oh.
It's on him too.
Whoa, I got 4 elders, 5 elders in here.
Oh, yeah.
I could get fired real easily.
It's just a class full of elders.
That's
I'll
right.
tell you, when all this show up for your class.
Well, I do appreciate Jimmy filling in for me, bringing a little bit of scholarship to the Craig Hour here. I'm bad not to. I don't know. I feel like I don't get the deep, it's not like a college class, but I am enjoying it, and I appreciate your positive feedback. We are in chapter 46 this evening of the book of Isaiah. I'm going as fast as I can. As fast as I can. I have enjoyed it because, to be honest with you, I don't know that I've ever studied the book of Isaiah outside of school. So it's caused me to think. Jimmy, you broke it down into 2 parts, and they have broken it down into 2 parts, chapters 1 through 39, basically Assyrian and a lot of other stuff, and the Babylonian afterwards. Well, let me quit talking. Let's get into the text. One of the reasons that I like to read it the way we do, or the way I do, is because, does anybody struggle when you read with your mind just bouncing all over the place? I do bad. So for me to slow down and read it and just kind of let it sink in sometimes, and I know I've sat in many classes over the years. Does anybody go home and study over the week? I didn't think so. So you're not going home and doing homework. So chances are you've not read 5 or 6 chapters ahead of me. So let's just jump into 46. Let me get these fingerprints off my lenses so that I can actually see. And we will see what Isaiah wants to say to us this evening. It's not Isaiah talking, but it's God. Bel bows down. Nebo stoops. Their idols were on the beast and on the cattle. Your carriages were heavily loaded, a burden to the weary beast. They stooped, they bowed down together. They could not deliver the burden, but have themselves gone into captivity. Listen to me, O house of Jacob, and all the remnant of the house of Israel, who have been upheld by me from birth, who have been carried from the womb. Even to your old age, I am he. Even to the gray hairs, I carry you. I have made and I will bear. Even I will carry and will deliver you. To whom will you liken me and make me equal and compare me, that we should be alike? They lavish gold out of the bag and weigh silver out on the scales. They hire a goldsmith and he makes it a god. They prostrate themselves. Yes, they worship. They bear it on the shoulder, they carry it, and set it in its place, and it stands. From its place it shall not move. Though one cries out to it, yet it cannot answer, nor save him out of his trouble. I want to stop there for a minute, because 2 weeks ago when I was with you, I said I didn't want Jimmy or whoever to jump into chapter 46. Did you?
2 verses.
You got on my 2 verses. Do you get the imagery there? You know, we're talking about these false gods, these idols and all that. And one, we see a little bit, they're being carried away in the 2nd verse. They themselves have gone into captivity. Not sure exactly what's going on. Lee may be able to shed some light on it about how these gods, or maybe the gods of the Babylonians, are being pulled away. But what's the imagery? You take these gods, you've got them on a cart, and they're being pulled along by a beast, an ox. But what's it doing to the ox? What's the picture that's being painted?
It's tiring them out.
It's wearing them out. It's dragging them down. Even so much, it's a burden for this beast of burden to drag them. They're bowing down. But the comparison contrast with the Lord. You've got to carry your God. I've carried you from the beginning. Your God wears out the beast that's designed to do labor. I've upheld you. I've carried you on my shoulders from the womb before you existed, to the point of the old and the gray hair. I hold you. I carry you. Do you hear the beauty there? You're worshiping and serving something that by itself, it's sitting on this cart that says, it just stands there. It can't move. It can't answer. It can do nothing. But who am I? I'm an intimate God who takes care of you. I've upheld you from birth, carried you from the womb, even in your old age. I am He. I have made, and I will bear. I will carry you, and I will deliver you. As we continue on, and we jump down about verse 5, and it starts in just this, God in these past couple of chapters, since about 40, he's talked a lot about, there is none like me. But there again, to whom will you liken me? To whom will you liken me? What are some of these gods fashioned like? Or even if we don't know about those specific gods, what are some gods or idols throughout time been fashioned like? Animals. If we think about the Egyptians, we might see a human with an animal head. Everybody knows little old fat round Buddha. That's the God I want right there, is a short, dumpy, bald man. He's going to save the day, right? The creator of the universe asked a question. Who are you going to compare me to? There's none like me. There is no comparison. We can't even fathom. We can't even with our own mind. The best that man can come up with are... Carrie?
I love this burden aspect that you talk about in these idols. Not only are they a burden to the people, but they're a burden even to the beasts. And, it should remind us of what is in Matthew, I think it's 10:30, where Jesus himself says, my yoke is easy, my burden is light.
You have created something. Now, I was focusing on it's a burden to the beast. You said it's a burden to the people. Both. And if we want to pull that forward 3,000 years, think of the gods that we create. Have we created any God that actually makes our life better or easier?
It costs us the time. It consumes our time. It steals our resources. And it draws us away from the true and one living God.
That's right. It's like if I can get it wrong here, the Rabbi Zechariah that says, sin will take you further than you intended to go, cost you more than you ever intended to pay, and keep you longer than you ever intended to stay. And that's exactly what's happened with their false gods. And not only that, as we read in the text, and it's talking about this, who will you liken? Who are you even going to make equal or compare that we should be alike? And he goes through the construction of these idols. Where's the origination of these idols?
Well, the origination?
Well, according to text, you can come up with... Go ahead and say what you're saying.
Okay, well, what I thought about was, it all starts with a human need. Verse 7 says that God says that even though someone cries out to it, it cannot answer, it cannot save them from their troubles. So the origins of all of this, idol worship and idol, are our cries for help, our sense and awareness of personal need and stress and difficulty and hardship and fear and those kind of things. That's where it all starts. It starts in the human heart and experience.
So we are born with a desire to seek something greater than ourselves.
Because we really down deep acknowledge that we're not in control, and things can happen that can be very bad.
We'll pursue that in a moment. In tech, and I hope that's not a dismiss me thing. That you're absolutely right, and that's not exactly what I was thinking. In this context, in verse 6, this God that they've created, it originated in a bag that they had. They lavished their bag of gold. It came out of their purse. It reminds you of even, Moses may have said, well, we threw the gold into the fire and out popped this ox. Nothing popped out of this. They took their purse out and they started weighing it out on the scales. The origination came from them, but it came out of their own possessions. It's not like they were going through the wilderness and found a God. They created it themselves. Yes, Joe?
As I look at this, I often think that God is really mocking them. And it shows us that really there is no other entity, no other concept, no other imagined thing that can compare to God. Making it a little g is not enough. There should only be one time that term is used, and that is for God. There is nothing else that comes close enough that we could even call it like a God or similar to God or lowercase God. There's only God. And nothing, absolutely nothing that man can conceive of comes even close enough to be compared. And I think that's what God is really spelling out.
You know what I got out of all that? That I am very godly in my sarcasm. So God sarcastically, are you even thinking straight, folks? Are you even paying attention to what you're doing? Because there is none like me. And you're absolutely right. They're not thinking straight. You act like you're twitching, Lee.
That's getting ready for the boat in there. I think we find that beauty of the way that God expresses himself when he told Moses his name. And when Moses said, who should I tell him to send me? He said, I exist. I am. These idols don't exist. They're fashioned.
They existed because you created them out of your possessions.
Exactly. But God modified. Yahweh Jireh, God provides. I am the Lord who provides. Those modify the reality. God exists. And that's what sets him apart from these other small g gods that don't compare.
And I don't want to jump ahead too far, but in chapter 47, what is the leader of the Babylonians, or this Chaldean leader that they're talking about? Therefore, hear this now. Chapter 47, I don't know if I said it, verse 8. Therefore, hear this now, you who are given to pleasures, who dwell surely, who say in your heart, I am, and there is none like me. So you've got a worldly leader speaking like God, putting themselves on the level. We'll get more into that later. I've shared with you that I felt a little strange and guilty some week because I keep reading it. It's like it's the same words over and over and over and over, chapter after chapter. God is needing to remind his people. It's important for us to be reminded today. But the point that Lee just mentioned If you sat for just a moment and tried to, as William Woodson would say, let that waller around in there, let it waller around for a minute. I am. From the beginning of time, I am. I'm the existent one. We wouldn't have another God, would we? If we totally tried to slow down a moment and comprehend who it is that's talking, there would be no other questions. What were you going to say, Joe?
Well, it goes along with the concept that has been repeated millions of times, a society or a culture trying to develop is doomed to failure if they don't learn from their history. If you don't read your history, you'll repeat it. So if you go back to the beginning, God is the only one that in the beginning already was. Anything that they fashioned came after they came along. But in the beginning, God. And that right there should settle it for anybody.
As you were saying, it makes me think, imitation is a great form of flattery from us, not for God. You can't imitate God. Jim?
I understood as I was reading through this chapter that since these words are spoken probably 100 years before any of this is going to occur, I think that one of the messages here, and I think everything that's been said is really something that can be drawn from this text, but one of the messages here, it wasn't the gods of the Babylonians that that gave them the strength to come and conquer Judah and take down Jerusalem. It was the God who's now pointing out that is sovereign over even the gods of the Babylonians, who had already determined that this punishment was going to occur, and now he is going to extract or bring about punishment on the Babylonians as well. All this is part of the plan of the sovereign God, and the people of Israel are hearing this well in advance of what God is intending to occur. So it has nothing to do with those gold and silver idols that the Babylonians worship. They have no power.
Their gods, well, even up into verse 4, I have made, I will hear, even I will carry and will deliver you. It goes on, it's pointed out, right? Your gods have done nothing. I'm the one carrying the weight. But keep your thought, because it's going to pop up again later on. I'm in the New Testament. You'll know this passage. Now, while Paul waited for them at Athens, and his spirit was provoked within him, and he saw the city which was given over to idols. Therefore he reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and with the Gentile worshippers, in the marketplace daily with those who happened to be there. And certain Epicurean and Stoic philosophers encountered him, and some said, "What does this babbler want to say?" Others said, he seems to be a proclaimer of a foreign god, because he preached to them Jesus and the resurrection. And then preached to them Jesus and the resurrection. And he took them and brought him to the Areopagus and said, "May we know what this new doctrine is of which you speak? For you are bringing some strange things to our ears. Therefore we want to know what these things mean." And as I think about that, as Paul is dealing with this group of people, we know our gods, but you're telling us something we don't know. It's strange. And I've been thinking back with Isaiah, the Babylonians, the Chaldeans, the Assyrians, they knew their gods. They might have heard of little. So can you imagine, as God's people supposed to be delivering, tell us of this new God. And I want you to think about that a little bit with us today in this culture. People know of their gods. Think about that concept when, John, you're teaching of a new God. Let us know about it. How you and I, when we're truly being the disciples that we're supposed to be, teaching of the church, teaching of what Jesus has done, a lot like with Paul dealing here, we're telling them of a new God. and we need to share, and we need to be ready. But as we go through, just think about this. For you are bringing some strange things to our ears. Therefore, we want to know what these things mean. For all the Athenians and our foreigners who were there spent their time in nothing else but either to tell or to hear something new. And Paul stood in the midst there, Areopagus, and said, Men of Athens, I perceive in all things you are very religious. Well, isn't that more accurately translated very superstitious?
Yes.
For as I was passing through and considering the objects of your worship, I even found an altar with this inscription to the unknown God. Therefore, the one whom you worship without knowing, him I'm going to proclaim. God who made the world and everything in it, since he is the Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with hands, nor is he worshipped with men's hands, as though he needed anything, since he gives life to all, breath and all things. And he has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on the face of the earth, and has determined their pre-appointed times and their boundaries and their dwelling places. Kind of what you're saying, I think, Jimmy. God who created the world. They're looking at these little bitty gods who mean nothing, that have to be carried around on their shoulders or backs on the beasts of burdens, and they're wearing them out, they're wearing the people out. I have from the beginning of time carried you. I create. Jimmy, you were talking about all these things are said. Verse 8. Remember this and show yourselves. Recall to your mind. Remember, think about it. Remember the former things of old. I am God, and there is no other. I am God, and there is none like me. Declaring the end from the beginning. Your gods who can't speak, can't do anything, can't heal, can't save, they're a burden. And I can tell you the end before it even starts. And from ancient times, things that are not yet done, like you said, he's telling them 150 years or so before it even happened. Misplaced. Declaring from the end of the beginning, from ancient times, things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure. Calling a bird of prey from the east, and the man who executes my counsel from far country. Indeed, I have spoken it. I will also bring it to pass. I have purposed it. I will also do it. The security that when it's in God's mind, it's in God's plan. When God speaks it, you can count it like our salvation. Even though we're not yet in heaven, we can count it as if we've already received the gift because of what we've obeyed. When God speaks it into existence, it's it. That's it. Their gods have done nothing.
It still amazes me, this bird of prey from the east. God's telling them that this bird of prey is another one of his avengers that he's going to use to conquer the Babylonians, Osiris.
Well, this whole passage right here, well, what I've written, instead of having, I write my notes in my margins. The importance of remembering. Did you just say about, who was it just said about history? We live in a day and age where God's not necessarily speaking to us. And sometimes it can be quite difficult because we've got 3,500 different religious denominations within the U.S. and a lot of us look alike and sound alike, and we try to use the same. And we see the world going on and on and on, and God's not speaking to us. So it could be easy to get lost. We today really have to remember, even though God hasn't spoken like he did at that point in time, Hebrews would tell us in chapter 1, God who has spoken in times past to the forefathers has now in these last days spoken to us through the Son. It's a good exercise for us to remember that the God that we serve today, the God that we're talking about and serving tonight, the God that we're going to worship this coming Sunday, is still the God that about 7,000 or 8,000 years ago spoke into existence the creation. He's the same God that spoke to Cyrus. He's the same God that spoke to Isaiah. He's the same God that's spoken to Nebuchadnezzar. He spoke to Abraham. He spoke to Moses. We have to remember it. And it's real easy sometimes to think that we serve this God in this Bible. No, we don't. We serve the God that's been speaking from the beginning of time. Even when Paul tells Timothy, what does he tell him to do? Remind them. If you remind them of these things, you're a good minister.
Yeah, like this young man here brought up about
You're calling Joe young?
yeah.
Oh, sure.
You know, learning from history. I don't think human time has learned. I mean, the calf, the golden calf, we still worship gold. We still worship. I mean, you got Putin in his inner circle. They got all the billions of dollars. You know, these leaders that even with not just people that are in business, these people in government, they hoard money. They want more and more and more. You know, it doesn't end. The gold is still alive and well.
We still fashion gods. And that's why it is so important that we remind ourselves so that we don't continue to fall into that same trap.
And I think John started out talking about that our idolatry is need-based. We fashion gods to meet certain needs that we have, but the true need of all people, whether they are the Babylonians or the Hebrews or the Stoics and the Epicureans, none of them fashion a god to wash away sin. Not a one of them. They never saw that as a need. Now, we're rapidly approaching Isaiah 53, and at the current pace, we'll probably be there in a year or two.
I expected that from somebody else, not from you, Lee.
But if you look all the way there into Athens in Acts 17, in the midst of that idolatry, what did he preach? He preached the God who met the need. And that was the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And that's what he foretold 700 years before it happened in Isaiah 53. They weren't even looking for a God that could provide that.
Verse 12, listen to me, you stubborn-hearted. You are far from righteousness. I will bring my righteousness near. It shall not be far off. My salvation won't linger. I will place salvation in Zion, for Israel is my glory. I'd never thought about it like you said it, Lee. They had all kinds of gods, but not a sin washing away, forgiving God. One of God's greatest attributes or desires is to bring us near to Him. In Acts chapter, the day where Christ is crucified, what happens at that crucifixion? The veil is torn in two to allow mankind to come back to God. Because from the garden, we've been separated. Your stubborn hearts, you're far from righteousness. But I'm bringing my righteousness. You don't bring it. God's brought it to us. It shall not be far off. The beauty, I don't know if it's poetic or what, but the beauty, the imagery of all this, our stupidity, our ignorance, our desire for other gods, our hardness of hearts, our creation of things, and back to the creation of gods. You know, we can go outside, we can see how bright and beautiful the sun is, and the Egyptian, different groups have worshipped the sun, the moon, the star. None of them speak. None of them can do anything except the one true living God. So the end of this chapter wraps up, and as you get that hint of messianic, I will place my salvation in Zion. Any thoughts, or John?
So we have access as Christians on this end of the spectrum. We have access to God through Christ, and so we're endued or endowed with His Spirit, with His communication. And so in 1 John 4, the context is false teachers. And by comparison, he says, you dear children are from God, and have overcome them, because the one who is in you is greater than the one who is in the world. And the bottom line of all of this is that, in my simple mind anyway, we have access to this Creator, to this God who asked the question, who am I compared to? No. We have access to a relationship with Him. And He is the one who is greater than the one who is in the world, called stirring up all this mess that we have to live through. We have to live it. We're in the world, but we're not of it. And so, this is so encouraging about our God Creator, that we now, through Christ, have this connection and this relationship with Him. And it's church-wide, and it's individual-wide too. It's for each of us.
Encouraging is an understatement.
It's fulfilling.
I don't know if I've shared this with you. Going through the divorce, written in the top corner of my bathroom mirror says, "You're the God of creation. You can handle this." When 1 Corinthians 10:13 kicks in and says that no temptation has overtaken you such as common man, but God who is faithful will provide a way of escape and will not give you anything beyond what you're able to bear. When the Scripture tells us that He can do more than we can even think or imagine. And I'm sitting and I'm worrying about it. We're dealing with a God who spoke. I was here before creation. Your gods have done nothing, and I carry you in the womb.
He's still doing it.
Oh, He's still doing it. And that's my point about reminding ourselves, because it's very easy to think, well, He stopped speaking 2,000 years ago. Well, he spoke 8,000 years ago into the creation. He's still alive and well. Don't forget it. We may not see it the same way, but it's the same God that He's still alive and well. Jimmy was making a point a moment ago about He used the Babylonians, He used the Assyrians. God's used different tools. But what happens in chapter 47 is the tools that He has used to rebuke or to correct His people to accomplish His good have become arrogant. And because of their arrogance, God's going to bring them down. And the lesson that I thought about in that is that just because God uses a tool does not mean that the tool is not subject to God's will. They were not understanding and seeing how God was using them in their plan, or in His plan, so they became arrogant. And the bottom line is this is a lesson that no group of people, no nationality, no country has ever been outside of the realm of God's will. Or no matter how God uses us, we're still to be, I can be the greatest preacher in Tallahassee or the country. I'm still in subjection to God's will, and He will bring me down. Well, he can. Come now and sit in the dust, O virgin daughter of Babylon. Sit on the ground without a throne. What would the virgin Babylon, well, what would virgin daughter be? High up, authority, rule. What would the virgin daughter of a family be? Probably a very prized possession, holy, righteous. What would you think? But she's not going to be for long. Listen to what happens. Sit on the ground without a throne, O daughter of the Chaldeans, for you shall no longer be called tender and delicate. Take the millstone and grind meal. Remove your veil, take off your skirt, uncover your thigh, pass through the rivers. Your nakedness shall be uncovered, your shame will be seen. I will take vengeance, and I will not arbitrate with that man. What's happening?
It's time for another tool.
Babylon was used by God to correct, rebuke his people, part of the plan. But now she's going to be brought down. Carry in verse 3 that word arbitrate. What pops in your head when you hear arbitration? Is that a legal term?
It definitely is.
The reason I pick on you is because months ago, when we first started this class, you talked about how we get so many scenes of God. He's a just God. Over and over and over, we see the justice of God. I'm not going to arbitrate. Why? He doesn't have to. He's God.
Arbitration involves a coming together and a meeting in the middle in a way that is, in essence, mutually beneficial from the eyes of man. The thing that is mutually beneficial in the eyes of God is for us to come to Him. That's where we receive the greatest benefit. And likewise, when we return to Him in love and receive His grace, that is what is most beneficial to God.
And us.
And us. So I'm saying that is what is best for us, but it also has to be best for Him.
It shows His glory. It shows His sovereignty. It shows His love. It shows the true nature of God. Again, like we've said in this class, and you've been the one that said it, that God just isn't kind of this madman that arbitrarily makes up rules. Everything that's within God's plan from the beginning is for the good of man. Because He's designed us. He knows what we need, and He's supplying those needs. But this virgin daughter of Babylon, maybe the ruler, maybe the queen, we get the imagery that now she's grinding meal, she's becoming a slave. She's going to be humbled. As we continue on, as for our Redeemer, the Lord of hosts is His name, the Holy One of Israel. Because all of this is taking place in this conversation about their gods versus your God. Your fashioned gods that are burdened versus the very God that spoke, the very God who has been there, the very God that has carried, the very God that I'm trying to remind you of. Sit in silence and go into darkness, O daughter of Chaldeans. For you shall no longer be called the Lady of Kingdoms. And this is what I was referring to with Jimmy. I was angry with my people. I have profaned my inheritance and I gave them into your hand. Don't think for 1 minute because of your greatness, your power, your gods, you conquered this people. I gave it to you. You showed no mercy. It sounds like there may have been a mistake, but you showed no mercy on the elderly, and you laid your yoke very heavily. And you said, I shall be a lady forever. because you forgot how you forgot who did this, you forgot who put you in this position of power, you forgot who was really in control. You took credit for it. You're saying, I'm going to be this great lady. You've brought this upon yourself. So that you did not take these things to heart, nor remember the latter end of them. Therefore, this now you are given to your pleasure. Therefore, hear this now, you who are given to your pleasures, who dwell securely, who say in your heart, I am, and there is none else besides me. They're speaking like they're God. They're speaking like they're on the same level with God. He said, I shall not sit as a widow, nor shall I know the loss of children. But these two things shall come to you in a moment, in one day, the loss of children and widowhood. They shall come upon you in their fullness, because of the multitude of your sorcerers or sorceries, for the abundance of your enchantments. The very thing that they took pride in, or the very thing that said, this can't happen to me, God does. Why? Well, one, he's pointed it out because they have been arrogant and not realized who put them in this position. But like I said, they were a tool of God's, but they're still subject to his rule.
Lee so aptly reminded us on Sunday about the fall of Babylon, how immediate it happened. And they were in the midst of partying and celebrating and having a great time and enjoying their prosperity and all of having their gods that was them there with them so they could give their gods credit. And when Jehovah God brought his vengeance, he brought it quickly and completely.
We are also reminded that when Christ returns, now what are those that are in the field? It's going to happen. It's going to happen quickly. Verse 10 kicks in and it says, for you have trusted in your wickedness. Think about it. Wow. You have trusted in your wickedness. You have said, no one sees me. Well, I'm hung up on that for you trusting your wickedness. I've known a person or two that and this New Testament speaks of it. It's not enough that they want to do wicked things. They want you to do them with them. They're not satisfied unless they can drag you down. You've trusted in your wickedness. You have said, no one sees me. It's like you can hide all this. This is underlined. Lee's giving you permission to underline in your Bible, so this is one. Your wisdom and your knowledge has warped you. And you have said in your heart, I am, and there is no one else beside me. Your knowledge and your wisdom have warped you.
You know, this really shows that they have reached the pinnacle of arrogance and pride, and they declare themselves God. And you know there's only one way from that point, and it's down.
And they're not the only group in history.
Once you're at the top, there's only one direction.
And it's because their knowledge and wisdom is arrogance. And it's a warning. Also, we need to be very careful and understand who we are.
Well, there's a lot of woke people these days.
Okay, I can't touch that right now. We've got a minute or two left. Has anybody got a good, something that, the reason I think reading it and slowing down and putting a little emphasis on the verses and stuff really makes it come alive. This is not a dead book. It is not just some ink on a paper, but this living God that has been there from the beginning, who carries us and delivers us and brings his salvation near to us. And it is encouraging. Anyone?
This is your last
I'm not sure I could explain Debbie's last comment. We were talking about the arrogance of the people, and she said there are a lot of woke people.
All these people are so, I mean, they're very arrogant. They are very self-confident, and they just think they know best. You know, they're very,
Aware of the situations, sensitive to.
yeah, so they call them, you know, they're woke.
They're woke, they're
So,
So-called.
okay, John said it right. In their enlightenment, we're supposed to live this way. And their enlightenment is nowhere near godliness.
Exactly.
That idea in verse 10, my translation said you felt secure in your wickedness. Your translation said trusted
Yes.
in the wickedness.
You put your
That is, you can't
confidence.
see me. In other words, my sin doesn't matter. It's what is the arrogance of the mind and the heart. And again, if you look at history and look at all of this, what were the Hebrews wanting to be redeemed from? The Chaldeans. What were they wanting to be redeemed from? The Assyrians. What did they want to be redeemed from? The Egyptians. What did they want to be redeemed from when Jesus came? The Romans. They were still not cognizant of what God's true purpose when He said, I am your Redeemer. Because they weren't looking for it. They didn't sense the need for it.
Is that kind of like how we don't come to God until we're in a tough spot?
Pretty much.
What were you going to say, Jack?
What I see in all this is that God's saying, despite all your badness, all your wokeness, I guess, I still will offer you salvation.
He still offers
Still here
salvation.
for you if you'll come.
I know we're over 1 minute. Look at the first few verses of chapter 48. Hear this, Craig fashion, I'll go over this again next week, so if you tune me out, that's okay. Hear this, O house of Jacob, who call by the name of Israel, have come forth from the well springs of Judah, who swear by the name of the Lord, and make mention of the God of Israel, but not in truth and not in righteousness. It's kind of what I believe when you were speaking just a moment ago. You call me Lord, Lord, but you don't do what I ask you to do. I wear the name Christ, but not in truth, not in righteousness, not because I'm washed clean or anything like that, because I'm trying to serve and honor my God. I just wear it kind of like in the world, I'm a Christian. John?
I think today how this kind of applies, especially to me, would be, I feel like we get really comfortable in our Christianity, and we think maybe we've checked all the boxes. In the religious world in general, have these sayings like once saved, always saved, and things like that. And what we don't do anymore is we forget to honor God and to glorify Him in all that we do. And we're not serving Him. We're serving ourselves, but we have these, call them a saying or whatever you want, that makes us think that, well, I'm going to heaven, I've got it covered, so I'm just going to go out and live my life. And I believe that, this is kind of just the same repeat of that, I mean, we're just too comfortable in Christianity in general, and we are not honoring God.
We need to stop on this note because we're a few minutes over. And you don't have to get that far away before God decides to wake you up. The reason I say this is because I think last year was a wake-up call for me. I wasn't worshiping false gods, but God said you're not where you need to be. So you don't have to go far for Him to yank your chain. Right back here next week. Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Greg.
Some of these woke people that you choose their gender.